What's up, everybody? Jed Johnson here from DieselCrew.com. Of course, you know they call me Napalm, and I'm going to review the series Fall of the House of Usher today. And the reason why is because what you may not know about me is I am a huge Edgar Allan Poe fan. And believe it or not, I will sit there and just have audiobooks of Edgar Allan Poe's works playing in the background while I work and clean the gym and do all kinds of stuff like that, cook. In fact, probably 10 times a year, I'll go onto YouTube and I'll find the Vincent Price recordings where there was this, I think it was called like an evening with Vincent Price or something like that. You can look it up on YouTube. And he does The Raven, he does Cask of Amontillado, which is my absolute favorite probably, and also he does the Sphinx. And it's just a one-man show that he's doing, and it's almost like he's got these whole entire poems and short stories memorized, because I don't see him looking at any note cards, or maybe there's something behind the camera, I don't know. But I just marvel at the ability to just rattle off so much stuff without any kinds of notes. So I really hope that's what he was able to do. So I would love to give the director some recognition, but I Googled it, I couldn't find it. So, but if it's on Netflix. It's a 8-part series, and it's called Fall of the House of Usher. And what they do is they take and they adapt a bunch of Edgar Allan Poe's stories into this series. And most of the titles are Edgar Allan Poe stories or poems. And, you know, a lot of Poe's stories were supernatural. So, like, there would be no possible way for some of these things to actually happen in real life. So they adapted everything, and they made a suitable explanation for how these things could take place in the real world. And I just marveled at that as well. There were plenty of examples early on of references to Poe's works. I wrote some down. So there was a black cat early on in the series, and I knew that there was a story by Poe called The Black Cat. There was a raven. I think a lot of people know about The Raven. It's one of probably Poe's most famous poems. There was a company called Rue, and I knew that there was a story called Murders in the Rue Morgue. Didn't know how that was going to come about, how it was going to come into play, but I was aware of that. And there's 2 women that work together on these projects to rehabilitate hearts, and I knew that The Telltale Heart was a story by Poe. What I didn't realize, I didn't look at the episode list until we were like 3 or 4 in, and I didn't realize that almost all of them were titles from the books. So if I'd have known that, I probably could have had an idea of where all these stories were going, but I didn't take notice of that until like the 3rd or 4th episode. I will say that I wanted to watch this series as soon as I first saw it pop up on Netflix, but I got outvoted. So we had to watch both seasons of Reacher, and then I kind of took an interest in Black Summer, which is about zombies, because I really like zombie movies. So it took a while to get into this, but I was chomping at the bit the whole entire time. So Fall of the House of Usher is a story by Poe where there's this Usher family. There's only 2 people left in the family. It's a brother and sister named Roderick and I think Madeline, which are the names of the 2 main characters in the Usher family in the stories as well. I'm going to try, in the series as well. I'm going to try to clearly, speak about the series and the stories, so I'm not confusing you. And I will warn you that there's going to be some spoilers in this. So if you're also an Edgar Allan Poe fan, then you might want to just hit the like, subscribe, and come back to this video later instead of watching it, because I'm going to ruin a lot of this for you. But I like the backstory of the two kids. I thought that it kind of set the whole story up, and as you find out more about that backstory, it's kind of eye-opening, and the details become very interesting. So let's go episode by episode. So the first one is A Midnight Dreary, which that is part of the first line in The Raven. So it was like, once upon a midnight dreary, as I pondered, weak and weary. And but what's interesting is the setting of this episode is really how the story, The Fall of the House of Usher, begins, because the Usher guy calls a friend to come and sit with him, stay with him for a while, and the whole entire series is Roderick Usher speaking with an investigator that was actually, not an investigator, a lawyer that was prosecuting against Usher prior to this meeting taking place. And the house is all beat up and it's old and decrepit, and you know, in a lot of ways it reflects the House of Usher in the story, because that house was also very old. It wasn't decrepit, but you could see that there was like one big long crack in the building. And by the end of the story, the whole entire house falls. So it's going to be interesting. I haven't actually finished the last episode yet, but it's going to be interesting to see if that house actually falls down at some point by the end of the episode. So like we said, it's A Midnight Dreary, and I just wrote down, will the house fall down at the end? It's important to note that Roderick is experiencing a form of dementia where he hallucinates. So what he does is he goes through, and he's got a whole bunch of kids, like 6, 7 kids, and all of them die throughout the series, and he relays the account of the circumstances to each one of them dying. And throughout the series, he's like, these kids are like coming back, and he's like getting scared because they're all ripped apart and shambles, and they like just appear before his eyes, and he gets all like scared and stuff. So the second episode was Mask of the Red Death, which I read back in like high school or college. Hadn't listened to it in a while, but actually 2 weekends ago I listened to it on the way up to one of my hand therapy appointments. And really good story. And it's about during this period in an unnamed country, there was a plague going on, and it was called the Red Death. And what would happen is people would just start bleeding out of their pores, and then they would die. So like once you got it, it was done. So what I didn't catch right away is that the first son that dies, his name is Prospero, but they call him Perry. So like, I think they mentioned Prospero once, and then they went to Perry as like a nickname, and I didn't catch it. But the prince in The Mask of the Red Death, his name is Prospero. And what he does is he, instead of like being afraid of this giant plague, he has like 1,000 of his friends come into this giant castle of his, and they have like this ongoing party for weeks, months. And what Prospero in Perry in the episode does is he's like he throws this giant rave slash what's it called, orgy. And in the story, after all kinds of time being locked away in this castle, this random person comes in with this mask that looks like the Red Death, and ends up killing everybody. And at the very end of this episode, number 2, everybody dies as well. I won't go into it. It's an adaptation though, so it's not just like a sickness runs through all these people. There's something else that happens. And one of the wives of one of the other brothers is there, and what happens to her, and she survives throughout the whole rest of the series, and it's like an ongoing string from that first episode. The third episode was Murder in the Rue Morgue. So I hadn't read this one or listened to the audiobook yet, so I wasn't sure where they were going. I knew that the hospital or the clinic or whatever was called Rue, but I guess maybe I didn't pick up on it right away. And I think if I had listened to the audiobook before this episode, I would have known right away what was going to happen by the end of the episode. But because I didn't see it coming whatsoever. So I watched this episode, then I listened to the audiobook, and it was pretty cool. So the way the story goes is there's a murder, a very violent murder of an old lady and her daughter. And like the girl is shoved up into a chimney, and it's like small enough that a person couldn't even get up there. And the face was ripped off of this old lady. And this dude and his friend in the story they get a chance to go and look at the scene, and the cops are investigating for God knows how much time, and this dude's friend ends up figuring out what happened just by looking at the murder scene. The overlap between the story and this episode is at the very end, and how the daughter of Usher was murdered. The next episode was The Black Cat. That's one that I like listening to that. The narrator in the story develops this issue where he's just abusive to these cats. Like at one point he cuts the eye out of one cat, and then he gets another cat, brings it home, and he wants to kill that cat, ends up swinging like an axe at the cat and kills his wife. So he has to seal his wife's carcass behind a wall. And in doing so, he ends up trapping the cat. And when the cops come and investigate like a second or third time, he's like talking about how well the wall is built. He's like, look at the wall in this house, this is fantastic. And he like hits it with a stick, and the cat meows. So the cops start ripping the wall down, and the cat is sitting on top of his wife's head. So he gets caught for murder. So there were similarities, though. They adapted it, like I said. And, you know, one of the other sons is like going crazy. He's on all these drugs. I mean, serious drug and drinking problems with the kids in this family. And they all have sexual deviance issues. And this dude is like ripping his house apart trying to find this cat. It was crazy. Next one, episode 5, was The Telltale Heart. And this is another one of the Vincent Price episodes that are on YouTube. It's really good if you want to check it out. Easily one of my favorites, along with Cask of Amontillado. And I was surprised, actually, that they didn't have an episode named after Cask of Amontillado, with all the drugs and the drinking and stuff like that goes on in this series. But you know, there was a clear-cut tie-in between what the two women in the series were doing with hearts to the Telltale Heart, and turns out that the operation and the tool that they were using to try to rehabilitate hearts gets brought into play at the end. Now, in the story, he plans out. The narrator plans out murdering this old man because he's got this like crazy looking eye, and it drives him crazy. I think he calls it like a vulture eye. And one night he creeps into the guy's bedroom, kills him. I think he even like cuts his body up, and then he like pulls the boards up in the dude's room and like stuffs all the body parts down into the floor, and then puts the boards back. So somehow, they hear a shriek or something. It gets reported to the cops. The cops are there. I never really understood that. But he sits there and he ends up giving himself away because he can hear the heart beating of this old man, which it's obviously not, but it's in the floor. In the series, the daughter can hear a heart beating everywhere she goes, and it turns up what's going on is she murders her fiance or her wife or whatever, her partner, and this instrument that they've developed is pumping the heart, and you can hear the noise. And they go in this other room, and the lady's sitting there obviously dead, rotting away, and the heart is still pumping. So the next episode was Gold Bug, and I guess I watched that last week. I never listened to it until yesterday. And I had absolutely no idea what this was going to be about. And honestly, after listening to the audiobook, there's I still don't see the connection between what was going on in this episode and the Gold Bug, because in the Gold Bug it ends up being a treasure hunting story, and there was no treasure in this episode. So they basically just took this box, and it was they were starting a company that was this monthly box in the mail, and it was going to be tailored to the person's interests. And it had a gold bug on it. I don't know. If anything in this series was lame, it was that. It looked like they were reaching. The 7th episode was The Pit and the Pendulum, which I was familiar with from high school. And I haven't re-listened to the audiobook because it's really long. And there just hasn't been a good opportunity for me to throw that on in my free time. But I have an idea of how a person dies in that story. And basically what it is it's like a sickle or a blade, a scythe, I don't know what you call it, at the end of a big long lever. And it's swinging like this, and the dude is tied to a table. And it ends up swinging. I'm pretty sure it ends up cutting him and killing him that way. So what I thought was going to happen was that last brother that was still alive, I thought, they had this picture of a demolition ball because they were going to knock this building down. And I thought the demolition ball was going to get him because I couldn't see how they were going to bring in this swinging blade, but they found a way to do it. And then the last episode is The Raven, which I said I haven't finished yet. There's still, I think, 20 minutes left in the episode, but I think this is the one where they ended up building in Cask of Amontillado, because throughout the series, there's this lady that keeps popping up. She was in the first episode when Roderick and Madeline meet her in a bar on New Year's Eve in 1980, and she's throughout every single episode after that, and she's closely knit with the death of each Usher child. And it turns out that the way they came into power and started running this pharmaceutical company was because they made a deal with her. So it was kind of like making a deal with the devil. They sold their soul. And on that first night that you see in the first episode, they end up killing a dude when he's drunk and he's dressed up like a court jester, and he's got the conical cap with bells on the end of the strands of the cap, and that is directly from Cask of Amontillado. So I was really happy to see that built in. In fact, throughout the last couple episodes, you keep seeing Roderick Usher staring at this wall, and I couldn't figure out why is he staring at that wall. I can't believe I didn't put it together that they actually buried a dude behind that wall. Not buried, but they sealed him up behind that wall. And, true to the storyline in Cask of Amontillado. So I was real happy to see that. I think I actually like was smiling and sitting there and getting all nervous once I figured it out to see how that was built in. So I can't say enough about the series. If you're looking for a series to watch, I highly recommend it. It was a lot of fun, especially if you're a fan of Edgar Allan Poe. So I don't know. Let me know what you think. You can leave the feedback in the comments section. Otherwise, this is just something that I was excited about doing. I took some notes and I went ahead and did it. So I hope you like it. Give it one of these. You can subscribe, but I don't do a lot of review videos like this, even though I have done. This is the second one I've done this year. The first one was the Iron Claw. So maybe there'll be more. But yeah. All right. All the best in your training. Take care.